food is embedded in our everyday. I think it's our culture, it's identity, it's health and well-being. I think it's jobs, it's everything.
Well, I think if you're thinking of the doom scenario, we don't have to look that far. Last year, most of Central Europe, the Rhine was dry, the half of France was bone dry. We have wildfires everywhere. If you haven't got fires and drought, we have flooding. We have, temperatures of 40 degrees in the middle of Europe. This could get a lot worse.
If it went the wrong way, and we got cooler due to the shift in the North Atlantic drift, we could be looking at winter storms and weather events that would make it more difficult, not just for us to live, for our flowers to bloom, for our bees to fly, and for the cycle of nature to continue. And for the cycle of nature to continue, it must be adaptable.
Social chaos and social instability is going to come from a breakdown of society. And that's going to come from climate change. There will be economic chaos. There's no question about that. Like, there's books written about it all of the time. It's just people don't see that because it's not on our doorstep. It's on other doorsteps.
I mean, the worst case scenario is that we become an absolute monoculture and we rely wholly on beef and dairy.
It's quite sad at the moment because farming it's just not what it used to be. Margins are so tight now between the mealman, packaging, diesel, electricity. It's all so tight now at the moment that it takes the fun out of it.
It's that expectation that it's somebody else's responsibility to feed us. It's somebody else's responsibility to provide what we need. We actually have to get more involved.
I think the future of food is a really important topic to discuss because food affects all parts of life.
I think it needs to be talked about because we are what we eat. We're a food-producing nation. We've ended up creating a food-producing nation which is exporting most of the food that we produce.
Orwell said food is the most important thing in the world. And so if we're looking towards the future and an Irish future, then food, especially given the dynamics of Ireland and what it produces, has to be front and centre when we consider that.
Especially in a time like today with climate change and sustainability becoming more and more part of our everyday conversation. I think we cannot talk about sustainability without talking about food. So I think it's a good time to have this discussion.
Food is very important to the island of Ireland. The agri-sector is Ireland's oldest and largest indigenous industry. In recent decades, Ireland has come to be known globally as a top gastronomic destination, with both chefs and consumers embracing world flavours and a renewed pride in Irish ingredients.
Since I've started cooking, the Irish palate has developed so much. Even when we opened Cava in 2008, people were sceptical about tapas and small portions and not having a big dinner and a steak with spuds and veg. And now, if you went to Cava in 2023, you wouldn't even notice that had ever been an issue.
Yeah, Ireland during the EEC opens up trade, opens up imports of all kinds of foodstuffs, opens up, you look at Ireland today exporting quality meat and dairy around the world, and 73 EEC membership is when all that starts from. And it opens up Irish horizons in trade, but also, I think, and I'd argue, Irish palates as well, because you're getting more quality imports from other European countries as well.
As eating is such a universally important topic, how we will grow, process, market and eat our food in the future is of huge consequence. This brings us to the question, what is the future of food in Ireland? Let's start our journey by looking at the future of Ireland's oldest and proudest food industry, the dairy sector. Ireland's dairy industry is built on the tradition of cattle grazing outdoors on grassland pasture for up to 9 months of the year on family-owned farms, often passed down from generation to generation.
Well, the main reason Irish dairy products are special is because Irish cows eat grass. Grass is the natural food for any dairy cow. Grazed grass, I mean by that,
Irish dairy is particularly unique and particularly revered because of the grass-fed method that we use. So our cattle are up to 240 days a year on grass, roaming on grass pastures, and that gives it the unique yellow colour. which contains beta-carotene, which is incredibly nutritious, but just gives it that really unique taste and flavour that's revered by chefs and food people and consumers worldwide.
The past decade has seen a massive increase in dairy farming. The government's promotion to increase the national herd, coupled with the abolition of milk quotas in April 2015, has led many farmers to take out large loans to grow their business. However, the profitability of the dairy industry looks uncertain at the moment. Farmers are understandably worried about the government's plan to drastically reduce emissions in the agricultural sector by culling cows.
You know, I think that we are acutely aware that the industry has to face up to the emissions crisis and climate change and the environmental crisis that the world and planet is in. I think in Ireland, we're probably unfairly called out for agriculture because it's 37% of Ireland's overall emissions, which is high. If you compare it to other countries like Germany and France that have big car industries, it's probably less of a percentage of the overall. But look, we're a farming nation. We have a large heritage in food production and farming, so it's a big part of our economy. But with that, we have to face the future and we need to face the emissions crisis.
In relation to the emissions, well, like the dogs on the street almost know at this stage that animal agriculture has to reduce. It's just we have a system, and it's understandable. We have a system in Ireland which is the farmers have been driven into a cul-de-sac through cap policies and through subsidies.
Well, the main challenges for the Irish farmer, I believe, is the cost of his inputs, fuel, fertiliser, these things, but he can do it at a much more efficient level than the others. The other big challenge is his image and his PR. I mean, everybody's worried about carbon, everybody's worried about welfare, but the truth of the matter is the Irish dairy farmer is carbon efficient. The Irish dairy farmer is very welfare friendly. Those cows, you've seen my cows down here, they'll come up and talk to you because they're treated very well.
In uncertain times, one thing is certain. Technology is sure to play an important role in the future of dairy farming.
Robotic milking is something that a number of our dairy farmer ambassadors with the National Dairy Council are using robotic milking, which is where you're essentially, as you can imagine, is using technology to almost milk the cows. So they use technology within the calving sheds and the milking sheds to milk on a timer throughout the day. So the milk and the cows get used to using this robotic system. And then another thing that's being used, I suppose, to monitor the health and welfare of the cows, which is so incredibly important, is what you would call almost Fitbits for cows, which is like rumination collars that cows are wearing around their necks. You'll see this very frequently now on Irish farms, and that's being used to monitor everything from heartbeat to the overall health of the cow.
Technology is, of course, we can't not use technology. We can't afford not to. We have to be more efficient. We use everything we can get to do it. We have our cow collars to measure their movements to help with the breeding season. We're using sexed semen so that we breed only female replacement animals in our herd. We use drafting gates. We use grass measurement and grass management. We have apps on our phone for all our health inputs. All our grass fields during the growing season are measured and put into our phone. It's very effective and it works very well. And the dairy industry is good if we can make use of our natural raw material, which is grass-based milk. We can make the best products in the world from it.
Well, it looks like the dairy sector will continue to be strong for the next few years, but whether that will still be the case by 2050 remains to be seen.
About 150 years ago, the vast majority of all the animals on the planet were wild. I think it was 95% to 5% farmed. In a little bit more than 100 years, that has turned on its head. We now have 4% of the animals in the world are wild, 4%. And the rest of them are all land farm animals.
Beef is by far the biggest category within the meat industry, accounting for 21% of food and drink exports from Ireland. Ireland is the 5th largest beef exporter in the world and the largest exporter of beef in Europe.
Irish beef is one of the best in the world because of the way it's produced, off grass. It's generally small farmers, small amount of cattle out on green fields. There is a future in beef farming, but the price will have to improve.
Pig production ranks 3rd in the importance behind beef and dairy in terms of economic value at the farm gate in Ireland. According to Enterprise Ireland, most of this product is destined for the Russian and Chinese markets.
So our welfare in Ireland is top notch. Our biosecurity, we produce the best between eggs and chicken. And for all food producers across Ireland, we produce the best.
Irish sheep meat production has experienced several years of consecutive growth. Over 60% of produce is exported, with the UK, France and Sweden are key markets. Other markets include Belgium, Germany and Hong Kong. One person who has managed to make sheep farming work for her is Margaret Hocktor, otherwise known as the Lamb Lady, by selling direct to consumers at the farm gate and at farmers' markets. She believes this is a good route for farmers to go down in the future.
We're based in Wicklow. My husband is third generation sheep farmer, so we have joined together as husband and wife and family to build our lamb direct business, our apple juice, we have seasonal sweet corn, and we have scent of Kilmullen, which are candles. There are 4 products, and so you were asking me about the future of it and the future of sheep farming in Ireland. Well, look, we're very positive about it. We know that people are really interested in lamb direct. We are here in Airfield estate and we sell all our lamb directly. Farm to fork, I suppose. We have a collection then on the farm on Fridays from 4 to 6 where you pick up your lamb. And the reason we do that is that we need to know who our customers and what they're eating and how they're eating it, why they're eating it, and making sure you eat it properly, and then the story behind the lamb. So when they drive in, they see the lambs with their heads, you know, in the blackberry bushes. They see them eating the windfalls in the orchard. They see them eating really dried, crispy corn. And they go, surely lamb is lamb. And I go, well, actually, no, have a look at what they're eating. You are what you eat. And so they love that story, and it's a genuine story. And there's a lot of hard work. So if I was to think about it, you know, sitting down with a glass of wine in 2050, what would that look like? I would say there will be a real interest in meat. I'd say there'll be a real education around it. People will really want farm direct, lamb direct. They will want to know the farm and where their food is coming from. We have a much more discerning customer now who questions everything.
Recently, Ireland's Minister for Agriculture said he's been looking into various ways to reduce methane emissions, including culling 200,000 cows over the next 3 years.
Do we want to expand the national herd? I would say no. Maybe we'd want to limit or reduce it. You know, I'm thinking about methane emissions. And that's going to be a difficult conversation because, again, coming back to Irish identity, farming has such a huge place in that identity because of those historical reasons, because of everything we've mentioned, dispossessions, famine, land war, all the rest. But that conversation needs to be had because I think Ireland needs to reorient itself away from just quality meat and dairy export.
Global demand for meat is surging. If Ireland reduces its meat production, other countries will simply step in to fill the gap. For example, South America, where ranching can be a significant driver of deforestation.
The likes of Brazil, Argentina, they have big ranches, thousands of acres, and the cattle are just out there. They're rounded up, and whatever is fit to go to the factory at the time, that's what goes. It's a totally different way of farming than the way we do it.
It's like a perfect storm in that we have an increasing global population, yet we have finite resources, and then we also have the challenge that's coming with the climate change.
While Ireland's animal agriculture is uncertain, what is clear is that many countries will be watching to see how Ireland balances cutting its high livestock emissions while securing the future and livelihoods of farmers and their communities. Exporting food is very important to the Irish economy. Approximately 90% of Irish beef, sheep meat and dairy produce are exported every year.
We provide between 15 and 20% of the global requirement for milk products. So that is an advantage to us. It brings money back into the country. However, what is it that we're actually not doing or losing out on? So again, we're looking at importing most of our onions, our carrots, our veg from other countries that have better climates that are able to produce a lot more. But again, it means that if there's a harvest issue, as there was in 2017, if there's an issue with regard to supply chains, if we have things like pandemics, then that does affect actually ensuring that the food will get in and that people can actually be fed nutritiously.
It's all well and good being part of a global food system and getting food from wherever we want. But if something breaks down in that system, and we're left with not enough food to feed ourselves, that's when things go wrong.
90% of what Ireland produces is exported. So if we can keep it here, at least then the consumer is sure of the supply chain. One thing that COVID did is it showed us how weak supply chains can be. The Suez Canal only has to get blocked up and we are delayed for weeks and months with getting produce and products in. So the only way of having that supply chain is to build it up. Your customers then know that you have it, and if anything ever happens, well, you're only down the road. They can come, they can get their produce, and then I'm also sure of that my produce is going to be sold.
So if you actually think of when a country is, I suppose, under siege, when war is declared on a country, there are three things that are usually destroyed first. The first would probably be the communications towers to stop people communicating amongst themselves. The second would be the media towers for the prevention of kind of the news getting both in and out of the country. And the third are seed banks. So if the seed banks are actually destroyed, it means then that the country who is under siege is no longer able to feed itself. Because the one thing that people often forget when they're thinking about food security is that without seed, there actually isn't any food. We need seed to grow most of what we eat, but we also need the seed to feed the animals that we eat. So even in terms of something like, you look at the Ukraine war, the first shipment of grain out from the Ukraine came to Ireland to actually feed the animals.
The good news is that Ireland is the second most food secure country in the world next to Finland, according to the Global Food Security Index. Estimates vary, but it is thought that Ireland could feed up to 10 times its own population. However, as so much of Irish agriculture is dedicated to meat production, Ireland would fall short on foods such as vegetables, fruits and grains, notably wheat. So the Irish diet would not be nutritionally balanced.
Increase the tillage area in Ireland. We grow crops very well in this country. We've neglected the sector. Really exciting times though as well. There is opportunity, real opportunity in this country for tillage. I do appreciate it's only perhaps 20% of the area possibly could be under tillage in by 2050, but opportunity is there. The drinks industry there. I don't think any of us are going to stop drinking in a hurry. Food, it's breads, your flour, the wheat for flour is a typical example there where it could really drive on again. Oats, another crop, a great crop that needs to come back into the spotlight because for feed and food, we're making oat flour now, we're making cheese from oat now as part of the food industry.
So, should Ireland be self-sufficient for its own food? Historically, Ireland was almost entirely self-sufficient for 15 years due to a trade war with Britain, which was followed by World War II. Bryce Evans is a professor of modern world history and has written many books about this era.
That's why I think so many people have written about that sort of 30s and 40s period in Ireland in such a negative light, because of course it is a very closed, very closeted society in many ways. But you can understand the historical motivations for it. You know, there were sound historical reasons for it. But today we live in such a sort of global and interconnected economy. I don't think that glorious isolation is really you know, something that anyone or any country should be aspiring to these days. Nobody wants to turn into North Korea, for example.
Well, it is reassuring to know that Ireland is extremely food safe. However, if we decide to be more self-sufficient, we would need to diversify what is produced here. According to Teagasc, many farmers are interested in diversifying their farm enterprises, and there are countless possibilities available.
I do think that we need greater food diversity in Ireland. I think that they've shown in England that they can grow pulses, and so there's no reason why we shouldn't be trying to grow lentils, chickpeas. There's a few farms growing spelt and rye, but a lot of these different wheat derivatives or seeds. We can start growing and start introducing into the Irish palate, because there's a lot we take for granted. And when we do a vegetarian and vegan tasting menu in Aneer, and I'm always trying to explain to people that we can do it, but it's very difficult, and I don't think we realise the difficulties that that exist in Ireland if you don't eat meat and dairy, because we just have so much of it. And then of course we have fish, and then we have pork and other products, but then lastly we have vegetables, and we don't give enough space to them. And the fact that it's much cheaper to to import potatoes even than it is to grow them, and we start to give more and more land over to beef and dairy and less land to vegetables. And then every time something like COVID or a storm happens, we realise that we don't grow enough in the country. So I do think we need to focus more on like a plant-based diet. And that's not to say I think we should all be going vegan. I just think we should be much more focused on growing different plants.
Some of the more unusual farms in Ireland include chilli growing, a wasabi farm, and would you believe there are currently 35 snail farms in Ireland. On Kilmeaden Mountain Farm in Wicklow, Ed Hanbridge and his family grow organic hemp. Hemp is well suited to the Irish climate and has a variety of uses as a food and as a biodegradable packaging solution.
The original gruel was produced using hemp seed. Because it's so nutritious, the seed here is one of the best seeds that you can eat. It has all of the amino acids. It has the perfect balance of omega-3 and omega-6. It has GLA, which is gamma-leonic acid, anti-inflammatory, natural anti-inflammatory. And it has a huge array then of vitamins and minerals, calcium, magnesium, zinc. So it's actually one of the most nutritious foods that you can eat. Because the seed is so nutritious, I see it as being one of the foods of the future, because it can grow in countries that maybe aren't as plentiful of water as Ireland is, the likes of Africa or even South America. They may be able to grow a huge amount of hemp seed, and with that nutritional punch that it packs, it'll be able to feed a huge amount of people on a small amount, because it's so high in protein.
According to data compiled by the UN, by 2050 we will need to produce 60% more food to feed a world population of 9.3 billion. Urban farming has been touted as a possible solution. Ireland already has many examples of this, including Cork Rooftop Farm, Waterford's Grow Your Own HQ and Airfield Estate, otherwise known as Dublin's Sustainable Food Hub.
So we have our own Jersey herd, so we are milking every day, once a day, and all of the milk is pasteurised here on site and is used within the restaurant. So everything that's grown in the gardens and produced on the farm, whether it's the milk or the lambs, ends up in the restaurant on people's plates. So the fact that we're fully circular, we are we won Dublin's Best Sustainable Restaurant, and so for us it's super important that people realise the whole food story. So we would like people to understand and really remember how important farming is, particularly here in Ireland. And we do that through getting people onto the estate to hear from our garden team, our farm team. But I suppose all the time we're seeing that disconnect is there. So we would have had over the course of the summer, super busy school tours. And at one stage, a couple of kids were down looking at the chickens and the eggs being collected. And the question was, can you cook these chickens? So the fact that what they were looking at, they didn't even realise ends up on their plate or, on the supermarket shelves. So there's a real disconnect there, especially what we're focused around doing is bridging that urban-rural divide. We are located very near Dundrum shopping centre, so we're in a prime position to bridge that urban-rural divide.
Urban farming is fantastic, absolutely. I mean, look, Wild Acres here is a nature reserve and we've worked hard on it for the last 7 years. But I mean, in relation to, we live in South County Dublin. We have a small postage stamp back garden. I think we've about 4 fruit trees. There's something that you could put in that helps pollinators, that once they get established, I mean, they're there year on year. They take very little looking after, and something that'll give you a wonderful crop of fruit in your own back garden, your own space. Using every available resource space-wise is, I mean, after the World War, there was the whole Dig for Victory initiative in the UK where they were using all the space to grow their own food for food security. I think absolutely, to grow your own food in an outdoor space, be it the roof of a building, be it your back courtyard, be it a small back garden, makes complete sense.
Since 2014, HiveMind have been helping individuals and corporations around the country to set up their own beehives, often in urban settings.
Oh, we've got a queen. As the corporate model evolved, environmental social governance and corporate social responsibility became a kind of a driving factor towards their approaching us. So some of them now want bees on balconies, some of them want bees on rooftops. They've got rooftops that are covered in native planting, not just ground cover, ivy, things like that. They've got hawthorn, they've got apples, they've got all this like 7 stories up in the middle of Dublin City.
You can put too many beehives into one area, and if every hive has, say, 50,000 worker bees and honeybees, and they go out and they're hoovering up all the pollen and nectar, for the other 100 species of bee, it's a real problem. And 1/3 of all our bees are heading towards extinction. And I mean, since 1980, 50% of our bees are in serious decline. So it's the wild bees that there's a real problem with, and that we really need to look after.
The Irish pollinator plan is brilliant. Pollinators in general are so important, they need protection. But now with the world waking up to things like Manuka honey and the benefits of pollinators to the greater environment, honey is being valued more. So a lot of the honey in Ireland comes from hedgerows, wild plants, trees. We don't have crops really that the bees would go to and harvest large scale or large volumes of honey from. So the honey we do get tends to be from lovely wild plants and a lot of variety. The honey we get is it's not too far off Manuka honey in activity levels, and if you don't heat it and you don't filter it too much, you get a world-class product. We can manage honeybees, and that means that we can manage pollination. If we can manage pollination, then we can manage fruit. And if we can manage fruit, then we can feed ourselves, we can feed nature that feeds off that fruit, and we're also protecting the seed that's within the fruit. And if we can protect the seed within the fruit, then we can grow the trees that the fruit came from, and that's the birds and the bees.
"70 years of increasing intensification and pesticide use has triggered a global biodiversity crisis. The sustainable production of food can help this. Ireland ranks 9th in the world for its overall environmental record, but falls down in the area of biodiversity and climate action, a new global report has found."
Biodiversity in general in Ireland is in a poor state. I mean, there's no point in pulling punches. I mean, in 2018, the London Natural History Museum conducted a survey of 240 nations in relation to biodiversity intactness, and we came out 13th worst. Northern Ireland right behind us, as in a worse position, but bad way. Biodiversity is in a bad state in Ireland.
I would say this, the EU is changing quickly, and so subsidies are beginning to come thick and fast towards Ireland now to the farming community, to change the way of farming, to move away from animal agriculture, to get into rewilding, into biodiversity-rich projects, etc. Like, it's a no-brainer.
Ireland is one of 186 countries which signed and agreed to the terms of the Paris Climate Agreement. Under the terms, the EU agreed that all member states should reduce greenhouse gas emissions by at least 40% by 2030 when compared to levels in 1990.
The European Union has effectively responded to the Paris Agreement by setting up something called the European Green Deal. And this has in turn committed Ireland, as well as every other member state, to reduce its pesticide use, to reduce its chemical use by half, by the way, on both of those, to cut by half antimicrobials, so antibiotics in animal feeds, etc. So the idea is that we get to a climate neutral society by 2030 is the aim, by effectively detaching, by decoupling resource use from economic growth. So this has set a lot of minds on fire because this is an incredible challenge. Two of the key actually strategies that come out of the European Green Deal is the farm to fork strategy and the biodiversity strategy. This has set a target of 25% organic land, for example, across the EU. Ireland's going to set itself a 10% plan because we only had 2% to start with. It's also set all of those other targets, the 50% reduction in pesticides and chemicals, etc. Those targets are also applicable to Ireland by 2030. So there's a huge challenge here in order to meet our European targets. Without meeting those targets, we have to pay. There's a lot of things that everyone's going to have to pay for this, be it the taxpayer, the environment, or the planet as a whole. So the impact is real.
Ireland will play an active and constructive role in the development of measures to realise the objectives for pesticide use reduction in the EU Biodiversity Strategy 2030 and the Farm to Fork Strategy.
Well, a lot of people, a lot of farming communities will be slightly concerned with these targets as well as the policy makers. Organic won't be so concerned because they're not using them anyway. It is the ultimate farm to fork standard that you can have, because it is everything from the feed that goes to the animals, to the soil, to the seed, to the output that comes from everything, be that cereals, be that vegetables, whatever it is. The whole process has to be certified organic. And that then includes when it goes on to the manufacturing side as well. So the entire food chain goes organic, everything. And it is all tested, it is sampled, it is rigorously and robustly inspected, and that's what that EU Green Leaf logo means. It means it's come up to that standard.
There is lots of initiatives in relation to restoring habitats and bringing back biodiversity. And I would say that there's a great awareness now amongst people, and a growing awareness amongst people, that we have to do something, that we can't just leave it to the government. We run workshops and tours here at Wild Acres, and they book out, and it's wonderful to see the people coming here and the enthusiasm to actually do something.
So, some positive news for the future of Ireland's nature. But what about our coastlines? As an island nation, fishing has always been economically and socially important to Ireland. The 2021 Brexit trade deal required the Irish fishing fleet to cut its quotas by 15% by 2025, at a cost of €43 million per year, making it one of the hardest hit in the bloc.
Ireland's relationship with fishing has changed a lot since Ireland joined the EU. You know, this is an indigenous industry. I think we've pushed a lot of people out of the industry, and now with Brexit, it kind of threw up a whole other realm of problems and issues, and then on top of that, then it was compounded with the decommissioning scheme, which will see another 64, I think, boats out of the 180 whitefish boats we have, which is a tiny fleet for a country, see them be decommissioned. So I think we'll see a lot of changes in the industry in the coming years, and we'll see a lot more imported fish, unfortunately.
Best case scenario, I just don't know where we're going, okay? We're lucky we're in business. What I did set up my business 19 years ago, I could not do it now. It's like, no, it would be too difficult, the resource is not there anymore. Best case scenario, and we see some change, but we need to see it now, and it's like, as I say, it is a 15-year plan with, like, you know, and we need somebody to stop listening to the fisherman, stop listening to the processor, but stop listening to the environmentalist, somebody who can be independent and look at the big picture and make the right decision. And that's not going to happen.
I think it's down to our government to have a better case for us to be able to have more of our quota and to protect our waters more. A lot of these boats that are coming in, the Spanish and the French boats, they don't understand our water systems as well as the local fishers would. You know, when the weather's bad, you know, spawning grounds are all here, you know, so the fish will come off the smalls and they'll come up here. Our fishers know that, whereas these boats coming in with huge nets and just, you know, scooping out, you know, massive parts of the system. So I think, yeah, we just need to take more control. I'm not saying do what they did in the UK with Brexit or things like that, you know what I mean, but they now have control over their fishing industry.
So if small-scale fishing is dying out in Ireland and trawler fishing is viewed as unsustainable, what is the future for fishing? Aquaculture and mariculture are increasingly being turned to as sustainable alternatives. According to Bordís Gawara, there are currently 296 aquaculture sites in Ireland. Examples include salmon, trout, mussels and oysters. Introduced in the 1980s, Connemara Abalone Farm represents one of the more unusual examples of mariculture on the island. Abalone are a highly prized shellfish delicacy which command a high price in Asia, where they have become scarce in recent decades.
Aquaculture is, I suppose, growing food in water, or growing, I suppose, food in water, and for us it's growing a shellfish in seawater. So I suppose you could probably more correctly call this mariculture, because we're farming seafood in seawater.
Okay, aquaculture in Ireland is salmon, okay, and even at that, salmon in Ireland doesn't work. I come from a fish farming background. I was in aquaculture. I came in Ireland to farm salmon. The salmon production has reduced since. It's all organic, but it's not organic because organic is better. It's organic because on organic farming, the fish density are smaller, Okay, it means that the fish don't get disease because the environment 20 years ago got riddled with salmon disease by unsustainable practice, like bringing salmon from Norway, small from Norway or Scotland live, and they just brought in the disease to Ireland rather than looking at Ireland as a special place and trying to isolate it. We've done the same with the oysters. Okay, something as simple as the Gigas oyster. Okay, and we've a lot of them over there because we've got very nice products with Irish oysters are beautiful. We brought in spats from France, like baby oysters from France, and France had a disease, a virus. Okay, and we brought that virus to Ireland. The virus we do not have crossover by itself. It's a long distance from France.
So, a mixed outlook for the future of fishing and aquaculture in Ireland. Veganism has been gaining popularity in Ireland and across the world, driven by concerns over environmental sustainability, personal health and animal welfare.
We treat a pig as if it's a commodity, and we treat a dog as if it's a king. But essentially, if you break it down, they both have the same emotions, and they both can feel the same amount of pain. We wouldn't dare or even think about eating a dog, and yet in South Korea, they eat dogs. So it just depends on where you live. I don't think we should be killing animals at all. I think we should be living in a compassionate world. I don't think that's an extreme thing to say. I'm often called extreme by the farming organisations. I think I'm the least extreme person. I think slaughtering an animal is extreme, to eat something that you don't need to eat, that might make you sick. So I'm not the extreme person here. I want to live in a compassionate world, and I don't see anything wrong with that.
For many people, choosing to live vegan is a political statement as well, and I applaud this. And there are many meat-free dishes and meat-free options, and that's all very good. But completely living vegan or turning everything towards veganism is probably not sustainable on a large scale.
Flexitarianism or casual vegetarianism is an increasingly popular plant-based diet that claims to reduce your carbon footprint and improve health, with an eating regime that's mostly vegetarian yet still allows for eating meat in small quantities.
Kind of around 2018 time, there was kind of an onset of the kind of vegan trend and alternative milks per se, and veganism became really fashionable. Certainly, there was a lot of companies that were diversifying. So for example, there's a lot of companies currently, large dairy companies that now have plant-based products within their portfolio. So I think in order to be, to diversify and be commercially viable, you have to be open to this flexitarian approach.
Everyone will have noticed, who goes into a supermarket, and let's face it, nearly everybody does, the huge range of vegan foods that have come on the market in the last 2 years. It's way beyond my expectations. I didn't see it coming. It's incredible. And that's happened partly because, well, largely I would say because of climate change. But it's also happened because people are turning away from animal suffering and animal cruelty, and they want to eat a more healthy diet. The supermarkets aren't providing these vegan foods, and all these producers aren't going into changing. Like even the meat producers are now producing vegan burgers. They're not doing that because they want to be ethical. They're driven by profit. And so they see, because they're way ahead of the game, they're doing surveys all of the time as regards consumer trends. They can see the number of vegans who are coming onto the stream.
10 years ago, it would have been unthinkable to pay for a restaurant meal without using a PIN or a signature with your bank card. So what other changes to restaurants can we expect in the coming decades?
I'm probably a glass half full person with regards to the state of the industry and where it's going. I mean, I'm still in it after COVID, and I certainly had my doubts during COVID if Anir would reopen. We've closed Tartar last year. So there are difficulties. I do hope that 2024 will be, I suppose, a time of rebirth. I think this year is very much a kind of a focus and a concentration on just getting stuff done. I mean, there's still the war in the Ukraine, the energy crisis, wage inflation, the difficulty of finding chefs. I mean, I do think people are very, very interested in food. We have a young 15-year-old from transition year doing work experience in the kitchen, and now we've hired him on a Saturday because I can see the potential.
Companies like Deliveroo and Just Eat have changed the way we eat massively. Ireland is one of the biggest users of these platforms. McDonald's launched its first fully automated restaurant in late 2022. Robot baristas already exist too. One company leading the way on this is London's Moley Robotics. Moley hopes that their vision will turn your knowledge about cooking and nutrition upside down. Now's your chance to become the owner of the first robotic kitchen in the world. Or from just £350,000, you can be the owner of a robot chef. As businesses across the sector struggle to get and keep staff, is this the future of how we eat out? Ireland, like many countries, has ongoing hospitality staff shortages, with a current deficit of 30,000 workers, including 4,000 chefs. The restaurant industry may be in for some radical changes by 2050. Can the same be said for how we shop for our food in the future?
Supermarkets have a huge role to play, and I think right now in society they're incredibly important, but they are really powerful. And do they have too much power? Possibly, depends on who you ask. I think we're at a really interesting point in time where we could start to look at creating something completely new. Like, what is the new market? What is the new supermarket, right? I think we've had supermarkets for 80, 90 years really that have operated on this idea of sell a lot and sell it for cheap, right? And I think we need more now. We need not just affordable food, we need healthy food, sustainable food, locally sourced food. And I think supermarkets, you know, if they decide to support that and build that infrastructure for consumers, they might have a role to play in the future.
I think supermarkets have a lot of power, and it would be good if they used it for the benefit for the community as well. You can see this in some situations where you see sometimes supermarkets, for example, put an emphasis on buying local and having local products available. But it's, yes, I mean, the larger the supermarket, the larger the chain, the more buying power they have, the more power they have to set prices as well, which isn't always to the benefit of the suppliers. So it would be, in general, it's always good to see diversity.
So the message to the consumer is, don't go for the cheapest food you can buy. Think of your health. You're gonna want to live a lot longer than you know, previous generations, and you have to. Your food is your health. You have to eat complex food, varied diet, eat different things, and find out where your food is made.
We've got to get away from this very, very wasteful, really American model of anything you want, whenever you want it, in whatever quantity, because it's completely unsustainable. We've got to get back, in a way, to nature, to seasonality, and to reconciling ourselves to seasonality, that we might not be able to get what we want from the supermarket shelf at a certain time of year. And if we were able to reimagine in Ireland like that, you know, better attuned to nature and to our sea resources and to organic, you know, in terms of cutting down our, you know, chemical pesticides, fertilizers, that kind of thing, going a bit more organic, that's obviously, again, a balance that has to be struck there.
As inflation remains high in Ireland in recent years, there have been calls for a food industry regulator to control supermarket pricing.
So an industry regulator would look at the price of, we'll say, example, my meal, and then he would link it with the price that I'm getting for my egg. And that's what a regulator would do. Supermarkets, they should support local produce, local farmers. They should have it on their shelves. There's local food producers in every county in Ireland. They should be in all the shops.
Fully automated supermarkets are opening around the world. In addition, technology is fast evolving, and it is looking like by 2050, both supermarket and takeaway food deliveries could be happening by drone. Tackling food waste is one of the key steps we can take to achieve sustainability, to help combat climate change and to support the transition to a circular economy and bioeconomy.
So what can we do about food waste? It's a complex issue, and we need to look at how we're generating this food waste from farm to fork. We need to look at our farm production methods and how our farmers are being treated. They're producing great produce and some of that produce remains unused. Supermarkets are very fussy about the grade of produce that they will take. They dictate what quantities they will take and sell, no matter how much is being produced by the farmers. So that's creating problems for our farming communities. We're also seeing problems in the processing, and it could be through the circular economy. We could be looking at processing our food more effectively and capturing the byproducts and reusing those materials in the bioeconomy, making sure it goes back into productive use rather than out as a waste. Then we have problems with transport and distribution. We need to be more effective at moving our food around. Better again if we can look for local produce that doesn't require those long journeys. And then we look at how we're using that food, how we're buying that food from our retailers, what we're buying, and how we're using it in our homes and how we're using it in the hospitality and catering sector. So that's where we start with the challenge of food waste. But it is complex. There's different processes involved in generating that waste.
We use something once and it's thrown away. That kind of mentality is not good for the planet, because you're just producing so much waste. Well, if you're producing that much waste, you need something that's actually going to break down.
Many Irish chefs have for years been calling for cooking lessons to be included on the school curriculum, saying it is a life skill that everyone should learn. If we want to shape the future of food in Ireland, we need more childhood education around food. Ireland has become a world leader in third level education around food, with universities like UCD and TUD leading the way.
So it brings together all of the scientists across the university that their research is focusing on food. So it is very much multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary. So it's coming from disciplines that are traditional to the food area. So you will have food engineers, you will have food scientists, you will have your nutritionists, but in addition, it'll bring in social scientists, for example, people from law, people from psychology. It'll also bring in people from science, for example, computer science, mathematicians, physicians. So it'll also bring in people with medical backgrounds. So it is pulling all the resources together with the common goal of really future-proofing food systems.
So for us at Airfield Estate, in 20 years' time, the dream is that people are reconnecting back with farmers. For us, we run an amazing programme called Farmer Time. So we have 100 farmers matched with 100 schools. Every 2 weeks, the farmer beams into the classroom, has a little chat about what's going on, and it's been hugely successful. And the reason that it's been so successful is that personal connection that the children have with the farmer. For the farmer, it's an opportunity for them to give a little bit of insight about what's going on, but also they're under so much scrutiny, so much pressure, when actually, if we don't have farmers, we don't have food and we can't eat.
Yeah, I think there's a growing interest in studying food, not only in the food production side of things or culinary arts, but specifically also this cultural context of food. So the Masters of Gastronomy and Food Studies has been set up in 2017 at TU Dublin. So we now have the 7th group of students coming in. We're becoming more international as well, but always have a very healthy intake of Irish students as well. And we see amongst our graduates how they're taking these new insights and putting them into place. Some in their jobs as chefs, for example. Others are building up these local or regional consumer and producer networks. People go into the media. It's very interesting what's happening here, and the interest keeps growing as well.
I'd say in the future, Ireland's always been an agricultural export economy, should continue to be an excellent agricultural economy, quality meat, quality dairy.
No, I think for the future, by 2050, there's going to be 10 billion people in the world population, and so the requirement for food is going to increase by 56%. That's a lot. So how do we continue to diversify and find foods that are nutritionally dense, that are high in protein, that can feed the world while also producing it sustainably and protecting the environment?
Part of that worst case scenario is there's a silver lining, in the sense that COVID made me realise that perhaps slowing down, producing less is the way to move forward. And I think that if we can focus on the quality of food that we have in Ireland, no more than the quality of people that come into Ireland. I don't think we need 20 more million tourists. We have like 10 million tourists, and we need to focus on giving them a really good quality experience.
Ireland has to change like everyone else. Like, we're only a country of 5 million, as opposed to China, which has 1.4 billion. But we're producing vast quantities of emissions for a small country. We have to change for the global point of view and for every point of view, and we can do it. It just, I think it means people accepting the fact that change is coming, and it's coming fast.
So 2050, the Irish fishing industry, where will it be? I don't know. I can tell you where I'd love it to be. I'd love it to look like you were in Cornwall or Lou, around that west coast of the southwest of the UK, where you go into small village after small village, and you know, all the harbours are full of boats and there's boxes of fish on the ground, and you know, and because of this, the communities are thriving because, you know, these are small ports. So I'd love if that's where we were.
As you can see, like, you know, Irish people like fish, like as I say, like, no, people don't like fish in Ireland, no, but they have to be, the fish has to be given to them, they have to have the choice, and then they will eat, bring it to them and they'll eat it. Like.
In terms of the best scenario is that we actually move back into that traditional sense of the community. If we actually look at, even in terms of farmers, the farmer social communities has been eroded because, again, the local processing is gone. The marts, a lot of them are now going online. Again, the millers are gone, the creameries are gone. How can we actually bring that back? There are communities that are trying to bring in the micro bakeries. So again, how do we actually look at bringing those kind of things that were functioning at a local level and better support them rather than supporting big industry that inevitably are going to look at the profits rather than looking at the people?
I mean, at the moment we're at a really important point, I think, in relation to our history, in relation to the nation, as to what we do, where we go, and what direction we choose to go. I mean, we call ourselves a green island, but in reality, I mean, as I said, we're 13th worst in relation to biodiversity intactness in the world. We're really not. So we can choose to go down a road whereby we produce food sustainably in this country and we value nature and cherish biodiversity. And for the next generation, that's massively important. It really is.
I'd say in 50 years' time there won't be a cab on the tractor. It'll be all automated and maybe electric, maybe not. There could be hydrogen power used. We'll have drones flying across fields. We'll have sprayers, like the sprayer I have here, works off 14 satellites currently. Like when I go across the field, it's like your sat-nav. It's a more advanced system than your sat-nav.
Ireland has the potential to produce all of its own food and feed all of its own people. I don't see that's something that's totally out of reach. I think that's something we should be reaching towards, and we should be reaching for it. It creates jobs. It creates food that we can know its provenance, and it's sustainable, it's green, and it's environmentally friendly. These are all boxes that we need to tick. In a box-ticking world, why not start there?
Ireland may only be a tiny country with a population of just over 5 million. But, as we've seen, we have a huge opportunity to become a world leader in sustainable food systems. The only question left to answer is, what role will you be playing in shaping this?